What a delightful morning of baptism and remembering of our connection to all of God's children. A beginning point, if you will, for placing our trust in the Holy One and an acknowledgement that we are on a spiritual journey. Some would say the ride of our lives. Some 20 plus summers back, during an afternoon off from seminary, I went with Sue and our two sons to Worlds of Fun, just north of Chicago. There were, of course, a myriad of different rides, but the showcase rides were the roller coasters. The boys and I rode on every one of the Mega Loop roller coasters, the kind that flip over and under themselves. We were upside down so many times we lost count and just about lost our lunch as well. I think roller coasters are a kick. I enjoy the rush of emotions that roller coasters provide. I enjoy the sense of being on the edge, yet still knowing that I am completely safe. Now, I'm definitely not a roller coaster expert, although I've been on a good variety. There was the Cat and Mouse in Arnold's Park at Okoboji, which would shoot you over the edge of a corner so that all you saw was space, and then take a 90-degree turn and plummet down a sharp vertical descent. I've survived multiple rickety, creaky wooden coasters. The clickety, clackety, clickety, clackety, clickety, clackety, clickety, clackety, clickety, clackety, clickety, clackety sound as you crawl to the top, causing me to think I would surely fall apart. While the abrupt drop-offs and back and forth slamming caused my breath to disappear. Held in by a bar that would clamp down over my lamp, I rode the emotions to the limit. And of course, there are the coasters I've ridden that have names like the Dragon, the Tornado, Batman the Ride, Space Mountain, the Vortex. They're imposing at first glance, well, even second glance. The harnessing system is a heavy-duty, foam-covered bar that allows for almost no body movement, while the rollers are practically noiseless. Faster and smoother than the wooden coasters, many of the turns incorporate a spiral, upside down, inside out move that caused my heart to jump to my throat, threatening to come out my nose. Both the old and the newer roller coasters were designed to thrill and delight. And all were designed to keep the riders safe. The builders had a plan to get me from the beginning of the coaster journey through to the end without harm. I knew that. Each time I entered the turnstile, I knew that the ride was safe. Before I stepped into the compartment and was securely locked in, I knew that the ride was safe. I knew that at the end of every ride, I would step out, a little shaky in my feet, possibly a little queasy in my stomach, but I would be safe. I wish I could feel so secure at times about my life journey. These last few weeks, more accurately months, have been an emotional roller coaster for me. Not knowing for sure what to expect when coming here. Wondering if I would be accepted. Saying hello and goodbye to people every week from the time I became aware of a move up until now. anticipating and planning weeks in advance while grieving the past and trying to be present in the moment, juggling the demands and the joys of family, work, friendships, all causing ups and downs and turnarounds that would create a most excellent roller coaster ride. Where, though, is the padded bar of protection for my life? What is the plan for my well-being in the midst of the chaos? I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in those feelings, even though the cause for them might be different for you. Perhaps you've come here today seeking some of those same answers. Where better to find guidance when you're in the line of work that I'm in than the Bible? This is what the prophet Jeremiah understood God to be saying. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I banished you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. Jeremiah knew where to find the padded bar to keep us hanging on when the life ride gets a little crazy. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. I suppose we could say that since Jeremiah was a prophet, he had it easier than most. After all, he had a special status in God's eyes and in the community's eyes. But we'd be wrong. We'd be wrong. The reality is Jeremiah was being torn apart with grief as he saw Judah, a nation he cared for deeply, self-destructing as they turned away from God. He was in the midst of an emotional roller coaster ride and could have easily walked away from being a prophet to enjoy a normal life. But he didn't. Walter Brueggemann, in a book called Hopeful Imagination, writes, Jeremiah's vitality comes precisely from his passionate conviction about the power of God to work a newness in the 0 hour of loss and exile. Jeremiah does not believe the world is hopelessly closed so that living is only moving the pieces around. Jeremiah believes that God is able to do an utterly new thing, which violates our reason, our control, and our despair. Jeremiah bears witness to the work of God, the capacity to bring newness, ex nihilo, out of nothing. For that reason, loss and emptiness are not the last word. In the midst of the crisis, when the pain is the greatest, when many choose to get off the ride, even as some choose never to get on, in the midst of the crisis is exactly the point when Jeremiah is able to speak of the hope that God offers. It is exactly the point. If you seek God, when and where you will find God's presence. Are you here this morning in the midst of a crisis? In the middle of a gut-wrenching life coaster ride that doesn't seem at all safe? Or are you here already with an understanding that God has a plan for you? and wanting to explore ways to live out that plan with you. In any case, Brueggemann goes on to raise a question that might interest you. He writes, what would happen to ministry and the church if the church were the place where there is talk about the newness of God in the midst of the shambles of broken marriages, failed church, diseased society, troubled faith? It becomes not simply a question of rhetoric or of strategy. It is a faith issue in the ministry, whether we are adherents to the resurrection or whether we join the heavy despair. What would it mean in your life if our thoughts this morning centered on the newness of God rather than the memories of our pain? What if our focus was not the experience of the crucifixion, but on the reality of the resurrection? Judah was fragmenting, destructing, because they were caught in the fear of the ride. They had lost sight of the builder and the plan to get them safely to the end of their ride. I would suggest they had stopped trusting God. What a ride they could have had if they could have trusted. What a ride we can have if we hold on to the promise of God. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. As scary as the ride might get, as breath-robbing the highs and lows might become, there's good news. There's good news. God has planned the ride well, and ultimately, God will bring us safely to the end of the ride. Hang on. Have fun. Just a thought.